Welcome back, everyone, to the Men on a Mission podcast. I'm your host, Brad Richard, and shortly we will be starting our next episode. We will be providing you tools, resources, and information that you can use to make your life just a little bit better. But before we do that, let's honor our country, and then we'll begin the podcast. Welcome back, everyone, to the Men on a Mission podcast. I'm your host, Brad Richard, and tonight I have a special guest with me. Her name is Annemarie Matulis, and she is part of, and I believe she's the founder of an organization called A Voice at the Table. And I'm not going to attempt to describe it. I'm going to let her talk about that. But I can tell you that it deals with family members and the subject of suicide. So from A Voice at the Table, Annemarie Matulis is with us, and thanks for being on the podcast, Ann.
Oh, thank you for welcoming.
You're very welcome. If you could just give the listeners a little backstory on you and kind of get into some of the details of A Voice at the Table and what it is, and how you're helping people in many different ways.
Sure. Real short version. Boston born and bred, first of all, and had a very lethal experience in my marriage. I was a battered woman, so I finally got free of that situation. And when I landed on my feet, still shaking a bit, I was stunned that there were no resources for someone like me. And I mean that. In Massachusetts, there were 2 shelters for battered women. And I'm not joking. You couldn't find them if your life depended on them. And my life depended on that. And I was really angry. I mean, I was angry about the situation. So I became an activist and an advocate. Civic engagement, public participation, just really raised the roof about the lack of resources. And I've spent so far 38 years in the public health environment here in Massachusetts. And it started with domestic violence, and then I was asked to help some women who had been involved with substance abuse and domestic violence. And then about 12 years ago, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Department of Public Health Suicide Prevention Program asked me if I would be willing to step into some suicide prevention work, because the county that I live in, Bristol County, was having an excessive number of adolescent and teen suicide attempts, not deaths, but attempts or ED admissions. I'm one of these people. You give me a black hole, I'll fill it up without a problem. I have no idea where that comes from, by the way. And so we created a domestic violence task force here in the city I live in Taunton, Massachusetts. We created a substance abuse task force. We created a suicide prevention task force. I'm a firm believer of triage. In intersection. I don't talk about one without the other 2 of those issues, and we've just recently added problem gambling to that. And what happened is it was grassroots from the start, all volunteer, and I guess I always joke about it as it was a little engine that could. We were not part of the establishment. We were not grant funded. We had no money except my paycheck. And we just did our work. We just did the work. We reached out. We created programs based on the needs and the input from the people who had been impacted. And in the beginning, it was people who had experienced domestic violence, and then it was suicide attempt survivors. Because there just wasn't much of anything out there in the late 70s, early 80s. And then we formed our major task force in 2003. And from that, we went by 2009, we had a teen center. These were all kids at risk, not with the law, they were at risk emotionally. And then we formed our major suicide prevention task force, which then went regional under the Department of Public Health in Massachusetts. And then somehow I stumbled into the American Association of Suicidology. I now sit on the executive committee of that organization. And I was the wheel that just wouldn't stop squeaking. And I kept pushing and pushing and poking the bear until we finally now have a division for impacted family and friends at AAS. What is it? It's people like me. If you've never had to stand in a room and wonder, is this the night she dies? If you haven't ever had to stand in a room and wonder, is this the night she's not going to take that turn and go straight into the woods? If you've had someone who's already been admitted for psychiatric concerns or mental health concerns or suicidality, and the phone rings, you jump because who's on the other end of that call? What's it like? If you haven't understood what it feels like to be frozen in time and fear-driven every hour of the day, welcome to my world. That's what an impacted family member experiences, whether it's the parent or a sibling or a close friend, doesn't matter. If you have been emotionally impacted and traumatized by a loved one's suicidal crisis, whatever that crisis was, and it may not go to the extreme of an attempt. It could be non-suicidal self-injury. It could be extreme anxiety and depression that just totally screws up everybody's life through no fault of anyone. Then you understand, you know how I feel. And in 2013, SAMHSA, Richard McKeon and Jerry Reed from then the Suicide Prevention Resource did a program on C-SPAN, and they talked about the importance of hearing the lived experience voice of suicide attempt survivors, that they were not welcome at the table, yet they needed to be welcome. And that just rang a bell in my head. And so a series of events, organic, they were not planned. I wish I could tell you this was really my great idea. There wasn't, it just happened organically. Ended up from seeing that show on C-SPAN to sitting down through the summer of 2013 with two attempt survivors, Craig Miller and Tracey Medeiros, and my videographer, my local public cable access station, Yay Public Access Stations. And we thought we were doing a 5-minute video. We ended up with a 30-minute documentary called A Voice at the Table, because we were talking about a call to action for suicide attempt survivors. By the time we screened it in April of 2014, AAS had finally acknowledged the need for a division for those with lived experience and attempt survivors. But in the post-production, and you know all about post-production of things, Brad, in post-production, I sat there with our videographer and I realized that there were no peer-to-peer resources for suicide attempt survivors at that time in 2013. And there were absolutely no resources for the impacted family. If Tracey was in the emergency room, she's my non-biological daughter. If Tracey was in the emergency room and she was coming out after a suicide attempt, I would be handed this stack of information, brochures, little shiny glossy brochures, then these big thick things about what you're supposed to do. And everything was about how to take care of Tracey. No one ever asked me, Annemarie, are you okay? Who's going to help you get through this?
Right.
No one ever asked that question. And so that black hole was sitting right in front of me, Brad. And I said, we need to do something about that. So in between post-production and our first screening, Tracey and I sat down and we wrote the curriculum for two. They're psych educational. They've been vetted as evidence-based wellness workshops to increase, not to give people coping skills, but to increase the amount of coping skills that they have in this particular situation. And we did that. The Department of Public Health in Massachusetts funded us to be able to put these workshops together and deliver them. And that's how we stayed, for the first several years. Just this, I call us the little merry band of upstarts because we were clearly moving against the grain. There was no doubt about it. People said, you can't do that. Well, I come from a neighborhood in Boston. It's called Dorchester. Don't tell me I can't do it. I'm going to walk across that grass as soon as you tell me I can't do that.
Right.
So in the other parts of it, from professionally, I've been a teacher, a vocational teacher, a trainer, pretty much my entire adult life. Now I should qualify that. I didn't work for 20 years. I was a stay-at-home mom. But when I got out of the violence and put my feet on the ground and went to work, there was no doubt in my mind it was going to have to be all around advocacy. It was about filling the holes. It was about the marginalized. It was about the underserved. And I landed primarily within suicidology. Is that enough of a little blurb?
Oh, that's great. I was just going to let you go because I know you have so.
I would. So much. Don't worry about it. That's why I stopped.
I know you have so much, great content. And I'm sure the listeners are going to gain so much information from you, with this episode, this particular podcast. We're going to have all your information in our show notes. We'll have your bio in there. We'll have all kinds of clickable links where people can, go directly to resources that you have provided. So, if you miss something, don't worry about it. We'll have lots of information, in the show notes that you can just go to. I was kind of formulating questions in my head just to kind of get our Q&A going.
Yeah.
Going through the different stages, the transitions and things, and then leading up to a voice at the table. What would you consider to be the number one goal for a voice at the table when it comes to helping family members or loved ones cope with someone they care about wanting to take their own life, either have or have attempted it? What's the number one goal that you want to, besides seeking them to understand why?
We don't even work at the why part. The single most important thing that we discovered was that millions of people don't even know that they are impacted family. It's secondary PTSD. It's not necessarily a primary PTSD. It's that, what's wrong with me? I feel a little down, and it's not depression necessarily. There's just that awkward, I don't feel right sense of edginess that happens. So our first goal is to teach impacted family about the oxygen mask. You can't move forward as an impacted family. I am of no value to anybody if I'm not putting that mask on myself first and making sure that my feet are firmly on the ground, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, because it's so easy, and you know that, Brad, it's so easy to get caught up in the take care of them, fix it. I don't want them to be hurting. And in the meantime, paying no attention to what's happening to myself. And that is not self-centered or self-absorbed behavior. That is the best thing that an impacted family member could do. So our goal from the get-go was to break the silence. There's so much judgment and discrimination and prejudice against having a family member who may be suicidal, with or without any other mental health involvement. Tracey had a head-on crash a couple of years ago on her motorcycle. She's okay. She's fine. She came out with concussion, and she had cancer a couple of years before that. The whole world came crashing in at the door. What can we do? Can we do the shopping? Do you want us to do the cleaning? What can we do? And we were coming home from one of her treatments, and she was slamming the steering wheel. And this has everything to do with what I'm about to say about impacted family. And she was slamming the steering wheel and saying some very colorful words. And she said, "Where the hell were they?" That's not quite what she said. "When I wanted to die. They want to take my life and wrap around me now. Where were they when I wanted to die?" Now, she fully understood intellectually these weren't the same people, but that wasn't her point. And she looked at me in tears and she said, "That's stigma, isn't it? That's what you've been talking about for years." And I said, "Yep, welcome to my world." And that's what happens. We have parents who will text me in the middle of the night. They've been at one of my trainings or one of my community conversations or town halls. And I have this thing I use, hashtag not my kid, hashtag not my kid. And the text will come in and say, "Annemarie, I've sat with you. I've been there. I've listened. It is my kid. And I don't know what to do."
Wow.
So it's breaking the silence, making sure that there's no shame. But families think that, parents tell me, well, if I let someone know that my kid had a psychiatric episode or wanted to hurt themselves, they're going to think I'm a bad parent. So when you ask what is the primary goal, it's to wipe that nonsense off the table and say, it has nothing to do with your parenting. There's no one to blame here. And you know who tells us that? Suicide attempt survivors. It's not my family's fault. Something snapped in me. Even with hundreds of people around me, I felt isolated and alone. That detachment, that sense of burdensomeness, that Dr. Thomas Joyner talks about all the time. So we needed to shatter that. And the only way we didn't have the money, we didn't have any political will behind us. So we figured the only way we could do it is just open our mouths and yell and shoot loud and clear and say, "Can you hear us now?" Be annoying and show up everywhere, send abstracts to conferences and get them accepted, and speak from every podium we could, including the street corner. And that's the single most important goal we still have, Brad. It's to break that silence, because we have millions of people who are impacted family and close friends. And that close friend could be someone that grew up with you, maybe in college, and watched you go through the struggles, but didn't know what to do. So that is the most important, is break the silence, blow up the damn silos of prejudice and discrimination against people, about mental health in general. We have to do that. And you know that from your involvement with Sally Spencer Thomas's book, that book is, that 3-book series is a tremendous loud statement to say, will you please hear us? And so that was our goal. We knew we were marginalized. We knew that we were dismissed. In the field of suicidology, do you know that there is not one grant funded in all these years to research us, who we are, what we can do, what happens to us later, how many become suicidal themselves, or whatever else happens? Not one grant has ever been given from any organization for impacted and family and friends research.
And
so you can see I've got a lot of work to do.
Right. It is such an intricate part. As far as the individuals themselves, whether they've attempted it or they've succeeded at it, and the family members are left behind wondering what could we have done differently? Were there signs that we missed? What did we not do? On and on and on. I guess when the family or the loved ones, the people that are around suicide, I'm trying to find the right word, people that either have thought about it, they've attempted it, the people that are around them that is such a huge part of what that individual is going through. And as far as asking, I think you brought that up when we in our pre-show conversation, having men specifically talk about what's going on inside, and it's a support group of any kind is very important. It's something that I try to advocate that with every single episode that I do. Once you get past that first goal, then do you get involved with teaching them, training them, and moving towards the why so they can really understand? Okay.
Yep. So what we did in 2014 is we launched 2 specific wellness workshops. They run for a year. The exercises are laced with dialectical behavior therapy, cognitive behavior therapy, with a big splash of 12-step modality. Why reinvent the wheel when you have a bunch of whole things that work? And it's about taking everybody sits down at that table to take their own inventory. We talk about dreams deferred. Attempt survivors defer their dreams. They no longer feel the value of doing that it's not their place to do it. Loss survivors stop moving forward sometimes. I am a loss survivor in addition to this. And one of the really wicked, awesome, organic things that happened is that we were doing these workshops. I would be in one room with the loss survivors. Tracey would be in the other room with the attempt survivors. One night, everybody was still, you always serve food when you do these things. And everybody was eating and hanging around the table. And I'm the no fun lady, by the way, that's my nickname. And I sort of tapped on the table and said, hey guys, we got to get together and get this meeting started, get our sessions going. And they said, okay. And Tracey started it with everybody sitting together, Brad. Attempt survivors and loss survivors. Now, this particular group that we work with across the country now, these are the people who are further along the healing and recovery path, whether they are attempt or loss survivors. This is not for someone right out of a crisis unit. It's not intended for that. This is not for someone who 2 weeks ago just buried a child. They lost to suicide. There's a grieving process that has to happen first. But these are people further along the healing path. And they sat down together, and for the most part, they had never sat down with each other. So one of the most incredible things that has come out of this is that our workshops now, we call them, it's a re-energize and reconnect, and it has a whole definition behind it, but we call it blended hearts. And we bring attempt survivors to listen to loss. They do the same exercise. So maybe it's about, I'm sure you don't have one of these. Maybe it's about the scorecard. A couple of people call it their hit list, where they haven't quite let go of their frustration and anger. And it may be with family members for not acknowledging the seriousness and severity of the issue going on. It could be the doctors, the hospitals, healthcare providers who, wouldn't, even people who are just jerks about this kind of stuff. And so we try to teach people that the 3 R's of anger are revenge, retaliation, and resentment. Now, we hope when they come to our tables, Brad, that they've gotten rid of the first 2, because that could make for a very testy little evening. But resentment can kill. I have no room. That takes your life away. So whether you're a loss survivor, they might have a whole different reason for their resentments. And the attempt survivors may have a very different piece. But when they sit there and talk about it, and they talk about how they resolved it and how they feel now, it's the same. And God, you couldn't have written that. I would love to tell you that we decided this was what we're going to do. And I keep repeating that because I don't think people put enough trust and faith in what can happen organically. Sometimes writing a dissertation is not the right way to go. Writing a training that has these checklists you got to go off on. Right. And I'm a trainer. All right. Name one. I've trained trainers for that. But sometimes the solution is natural and organic. and grassroots and community and family based. So yes, we have these workshops. We have fine-tuned them. We have adaptations now for domestic violence and suicide prevention families, for substance abuse and suicide prevention families, for problem gambling and suicide prevention families, and there's no limit to the iteration. We have talked over the last 2 years. I don't know if you know the guys from Stack Up, and that's a veterans. It's a gaming group. Tracy's a gamer, so we bring gaming into this as a distraction and a soul care action. Because we end everything that we do with, what are you going to do for soul care tonight? For Tracy, it's getting on a motorcycle and riding, and just in the wind, just getting all the tension out. She also works in the field. And for me, it used to be walking our dog around the house. We had to put Ashes to sleep forever in January, and I said, what do I do? Go out and walk around the house all by myself and have the neighbors say, what the hell is she doing? Where's the dog? So I'm looking for something to fill that spot of my own soul care. But these exercises, the toughest one we do is forgiveness. Wow.
Right.
And our goal is to ultimately not have separate tables at all. There is another whole group for me. Those are for the attempt and loss survivors. Finding Inner Peace is the workshop for the impacted family. They have to learn that control does not equal love.
Mm-hmm.
We really suck at that. We think we're doing the right thing and saying the right things, and what we don't want is our loved one or our family member or close friend to die, or to be really sad and deep in depression and anxiety or self-injure. But that doesn't mean we control things. It's a lesson I'm still learning, by the way, after 23 years.
I think a lot of us, that plays a big part in everyone's life. We could just go on and on. I do need to take a quick break.
Sure.
So we'll break now. And when we come back, we will continue speaking with Annemarie Matulis. And she has so much good information. But and I have some questions that are formulating in my mind. So we're going to take a short break. It'll be quick, and then we'll be right back with the Men on a Mission podcast. Welcome our new sponsor, Scars and Stripes Coffee Company. They empower veterans to build their own business using their e-commerce platform. When you purchase from Scars and Stripes Coffee, you are buying from a veteran, and your purchase directly impacts the men and women who have served our country. Do more than say, thank you for your service. Order today and empower a veteran. Use vet code Brad Richard at scarsandstripescoffee.com. That's scarsandstripescoffee.com. Welcome back to the Men on a Mission podcast. I'm your host, Brad, and we are back with Annemarie Matulis, and she is talking about a voice at the table and a lot of different things when it comes to mental health, suicide prevention, and the people that are survivors of people who have attempted suicide or succeeded at suicide. So welcome back, Ann. And
thank you.
The floor is yours. Continue on with where we left.
Where we were. So we stopped at Blended Hearts. And so the programs are the Re-Energize and Reconnect. That's for attempt survivors and loss survivors further along the healing path. We do 10 of those a year. We can do them more often, but people think that's a great idea. I can tell you from experience, no, it's not. You need a lot of space in between each session. So we do them once a month for 5 months, take 2 months off, and then we do another 5-month session, and then we just continue that pattern around. We do the exact same thing for the impacted family. We will do 5 sessions. That would be anything from dreams deferred to forgiveness to control equals love to frozen in time to, by the way, what do you do to distract yourself when you get into that crisis mode again, real or imagined. because impacted family have vivid imaginations and fear-driven behavior that we really have to work on, because again, back to the oxygen mask, if I'm not taking care of myself, I cannot possibly help my loved one who may be struggling either with depression or post-traumatic stress, non-suicidal self-injury, NSSI, eating disorders. I mean, there's just so much there. Well, you just keep peeling the onion back and back and back. And what we do is we keep an open door policy about this. If you want to come to our table, we don't ask you the 20 questions. Why would you come here? What did you do? Da da da. So that's not important to us. What if by the fact you wanted to come to the table is all that matters. And it's very, very easygoing process, even though this is an emotional deep dive, no matter what you think. It looks simple on the edge. And we intended that. When I created the first workbook, it was for NAMI St. Louis. They needed something really quick for families in crisis in the emergency room. So for God's sake, you don't hand them a dissertation. I can write a dissertation. You don't hand them that. So it's 5th grade reading level, the workbook that we put together, because they're shake, rattling, and rolling. God, they'll be lucky if they can. You need this. They'll be lucky if they could read a couple of sentences, let alone a paragraph. This is like see Dick run, see spot, and you've got to keep it simple so people get it. And that's the most important thing. People need to be heard. What happened in the process of all this was all being done just quietly in Bristol County, Massachusetts, and we did some within Massachusetts. And then because of my connections and my involvement with the American Association of Suicidology, we were asked to come to Missouri in 2018. They very much wanted to implement this process because there isn't a state in the world right now who has these, except the ones we've created. We're still very marginalized and dismissed as being unimportant, or, well, what role do you have? And I have one of these big data guys who's a good friend, and he said, do you realize that if we put impacted family against every other population within suicidality, you outnumber them all if they even came together? And so we went to Missouri, and Tracey and I did keynotes at their conference which no one had ever done before, to have a suicide attempt survivor do a keynote about her lived experience and then have the parent figure share that same story from the parental guidance perspective. We got inundated by people saying, oh my God, we've never heard anybody talk about this out loud before. You know exactly how I feel. I never felt I fit in anywhere else. And so the movement from 2013, 14, 15, 16, a couple of documentaries, presentations at conferences, the movement, like any grassroots movement, started to grow. And we had people hanging on and being a part of what we were doing, not just in this little corner of Massachusetts and Bristol County, but now across the state and across other states. There was no formal structure to it yet, Brad. We do have that now. But in 2018, that was the catapult. 2 things happened in 1 month. The American Association decided to create a committee at that time for impacted family because I made enough noise all the time. I kept saying, hey, it's me. Anybody listening? I'm not going away. I'm going to sit in your front step until you do something with this. I had a lot of people with me. It wasn't just me alone. And in Missouri, NAMI St. Louis funded us the day after the conference to train facilitators to deliver these workshops in Missouri. So when we left, and by December of 2018, we had 3 satellite programs in Missouri, and they're still there, delivering impacted family and friends workshops. We now have, jumping forward, them. They started in Massachusetts. Now let me get this right. We started in Massachusetts, then we added Missouri, Maryland, New York, Colorado, Washington, and Florida. And I think I missed someone in there, but don't hold me to that. And our crew in Florida in late summer is translating our workshops into Spanish, and they're going to take them home to Puerto Rico, and they're going to start doing that. We have a satellite little group over in Tanzania. that I met serendipitously through yep, I see your eyes go wide. It's a slightly different process. Suicide is still involved. There's this horrible component in Tanzania right now. Well, not right now, it's been there always. There's so much violence against women that their children grow up with violence and are out in the streets, and the women become suicidal. And so this young woman in Tanzania has an impacted family program. And we got connected by a social worker and psychologist in New York City. How's that for around the world? So we have that. I also had the opportunity to go over to Northern Ireland in 2019 for the International Association for Suicide Prevention, and met a whole bunch of people over in Northern Ireland that we also include in our family now. And so we are spreading across the country. My goal as the director is I would love to be able to sit with you 2 years from now and say, we have a state coordinator for impacted family in every state in the United States. And who cares about where else we go to? That's always great also. And what's the point of this? Because we have a wellness workshop process that is easy to consume, doesn't have a whole lot of restrictions on it. And the whole goal is to improve quality of life before there's another crisis. That's the ultimate goal. Have a life worth living. I know some people don't like that terminology, or they associate it with allergies. But that's what it's all about. And we hear that from us temp survivors. If only someone had asked me what I really needed, instead of just medicating me and not asking what it was that I was going on in here. So we sit people down at a table to pour their hearts out. They feel safe. It's a wonderfully safe environment. It's a judgmental environment, and it can apply to anybody. We have talked. I know you're really doing a lot with the military veteran community. There are some programs for the military families, and I know about the language difference. I know about the culture difference. I remember the first time, no joke, Hanscom Air Force Base. I'm standing in front of with the other trainers, and we're looking at this room full of active National Guard, and I'm saying, "What the hell am I doing here?" You know, as it turned out, we were able to deliver assist trainings over the 2 days. And much to everybody's shock, the crew that I had with me, as they were all being dismissed, they would walk by and they were shaking everybody's hands and shaking everybody's hands. And this lieutenant reached down and grabbed me and gave me a bear hug that I thought was going to crack my ribs. And every one of the group did it at the same time. And the master sergeant standing over right there, you know, like, what are you guys doing? You know, I mean, we don't do that. And they said, oh, yeah, you got to meet her. We got to do this. Because you know what they wanted to talk about in that room in the training? They wanted to talk about their kids. They wanted to talk about their spouses. Annemarie, what can we do to help them? Because at that point, there was nothing within the military environment to allow the families to have this. So we are talking with some groups to see how we can adapt this with that language, with your language,
Right.
and culture, so that we can adapt it. So this is a program that anybody can benefit from. The focus is suicide. That's important, you know. But it's also important that we know we can adapt it for things outside of suicide if someone needs that. So we've got the states, we've got a program. Yes, it is solid. We have a division now within the American Association of Suicidology. We have been recognized now internationally as being a vetted, valuable support for families.
With all that information, the elephant in the room question that I have is the Veterans Administration. You have the VA that's in Washington, D.C., but every state has their own Veterans Administration.
Yep.
How can this be implemented or expanded or brought to? what can I do as a veteran myself and other veterans listening or family members that listen to my podcast? What can we do to get this into the Veterans Administration as
Well,
part
one of the, yeah,
of the services?
yeah. One of the benefits of being on the executive committee at the American Association of Suicidology is being aware of all the other committees, of the internal committees that we have. And Keitha Franklin and Kim Rocco from TAPS, the Veterans Loss Survivor Organization, have a military veteran committee. And so we're sitting in on that. Now, one of the people who's sitting in on that happens to be Master Sergeant Tom Cruise, who's just about to finish his 27 years of service. God bless him. He is an impacted family member. He's an attempt survivor and an impacted family and friends movement. So that we're hoping that putting together a collaboration or alliance might be the trick to get in there. And then I mentioned Stack Up. The crew at Stack Up has been very supportive of our work. Our lead champion had to step away from Stack Up. He's now a full-time counselor out in the West Coast, Northwest Coast. But we have some people in place, so we'll add you to that. And I think that's the single most important thing. Reach out, send me an email. I'll put you on this new task force of how do we get the VA, I don't want to put it that way. How can we help the VA understand that this could be of great value to them? I thought the elephant in the room you want to ask about is how do you fund all this, Annemarie? It's like, we don't. I have a couple of grants. Almost every one of us that's doing the impacted family and friend work is doing it pro bono.
When it comes to the VA, I can honestly say as a veteran that there is so many resources, financial resources, that are misguided within that huge monstrosity. That organization, I've seen it on the local level, state level, and of course the federal. The resources in the Veterans Administration, they are there. They're just currently being misdirected. With the staggering number of 21, 22, 23 veterans committing suicide a day, in my opinion, this should be a top priority. It should be congressional hearings. It should be, it should go straight to the people that sit on the Veteran Administration, on that committee.
Not disagreeing with you at all. The one thing that we are missing is there is no political will. Now, we have made some teeny tiny baby step inroads on that. We do have some of the people within Congress who have either lost a loved one to suicide or have been impacted family themselves that have become aware of us recently. It's a hard road, and we know that. I keep saying I'm praying. I take it a day at a time, but I'm going to be 75 in a couple of months, and I'm hoping I live long enough to see this receive the support that it deserves. And I don't say that because this is where it started within me. It's because every day I get emails or text messages or see something or someone calls me and they need these services. They need these, and they're so easy to deliver and so cost effective. I shouldn't say they're cost effective. We don't get money that way, but they are. Let's not joke about this. These aren't big bucks. I mean, they're really not at all, but they are effective. Our evaluations show it makes a difference. It changes. It's life-changing. That I'm not exaggerating that. We hear that from the people who come to our tables that, oh my God, I feel free. I feel the burden off my shoulders. I'm focused in the right direction again. I'm coming to life again. And it isn't that the other projects out there, Brad, weren't helpful. They just didn't do, this is all peer-to-peer. There's not one clinical piece to this. As a matter of fact, clinicians have been funny. I've trained clinicians and then they've come to me and they've said, you know, you're right, Annemarie, I shouldn't be delivering these. I can't get that damn clinical hat off myself. I said, if you can't facilitate these if you're not an impacted family. That's like saying to our attempt survivors, we're going to have someone who's never attempted suicide or had a suicidal crisis facilitate the workshops. Hell no. You have to have the lived experience. We have millions of people out there, Brad, who have that experience. We just need to reach them. I think before we get the political will, do you remember Ryan White?
Yeah, it sounds familiar.
The 11-year-old who died from HIV/AIDS?
Yes.
Okay. And the outrage that came out of that, it didn't come from the government. It didn't come from anywhere else but the family. His family raised hell. We are family. And that political will that you're talking about to bring down the funds needed, the attention needed, the support, the respect needed, will have to come from the families first. So we need to continue to grow our movement.
The families and the veterans need to become much more vocal.
Yes. Yes. You have to break the silence and blow up the damn silos.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Probably shouldn't say that. Homeland Security will find me.
Yeah. You're fine.
That's how I start. That's how I start a lot of my presentations. I'll say, all right, I'm here to blow up the silos. And they all go, oh, what is she saying?
She did not just say that.
Yes, I did, because that's the biggest detriment and barrier we have. We have silos.
Exactly.
The VA is in one. Public health is in another. Mental health is in another. Veterans, civilians. We have to become an alliance. We have to become a family alliance to say, we're not staying silent anymore. And yes, we need to break the silence. And that's why I love the book series that you've done with Sally. And I love the people that God has brought into my life who feel as passionate about this as I do. I'm hoping some of the people who listen are going to say, hey, count me in, because it's not heavy lifting. It's really not. It's not heavy lifting. You don't have to worry about shitloads of. Oh, I did say that. You'll edit that out, right? Won't you?
No, you're fine. We're not. FCC doesn't have anything to do with my podcast, okay. So no, you're fine with that.
It isn't like, oh my God, they need money. Well, of course we do, but no, we don't need it right now. We need the movement to make enough noise, rattle enough cages, speak out on local cable access, call in radio, do live stream, do whatever, but start to say, remember that movie? What was it about the news? I'm mad as hell. I'm not taking it anymore. And everybody threw their windows open.
Oh, was it?
It was about a news broadcaster, right?
Yeah, it was either Roger Neal or Norman Neal. Yeah, where he said, turn it off, turn it off, turn it off.
It's like, I'm not taking this anymore. And we have to say that, because you know why? We're losing people. People are dying. Suicide is by far, it is a preventable situation. And not in every case and not all the time.
And it's
overwhelmingly, if we go upstream and intervene soon enough, we can save lives.
Yes, absolutely. I agree 100%. The other add-on to that is now it is invading our younger generations that are behind us. Yep. And those numbers are staggering as well.
Yeah, they are. I get our numbers here in Bristol County, and every death, every suicide loss is a hole in my heart. But when I see the age of 25 or 30 years old, and then see the tag veteran,
Mm-hmm.
my heart breaks. It breaks for all of them, but I'm also seeing a 13-year-old and an 18-year-old, and that's unacceptable. Suicide in itself is unacceptable. But the issue is we need to go way further upstream. We need to go so far upstream so that we have improved quality of life, and that means housing and jobs and education, and places to play and help kids learn how to communicate and talk and to dream again. In that teen center that we had for 9 years, one of the exercises we would do with them a couple of times a year is, so what's your dream? And the room would be silent. And I'd say, well, who's your hero? And the room would be silent. And then one kid stood up and said, my Nana. No matter what I do, she loves me.
Wow.
But kids don't dream. They're not dreaming anymore. They're not looking at healthy heroes anymore. And we have to change that, because that's improving the quality of life. If we can reach those kids, we're not going to be talking about 20, 21, 23 veterans a day.
Mm-hmm.
Because we will have changed the quality of life at a much younger age. And there are ways to do that with social emotional learning. A lot of school districts are doing it, but we have to do more. And that will only come from families banding together, putting aside their differences of any kind and saying, listen to us. Can you hear us now?
Absolutely. I think we're right down to the very end, and our time went by really fast. It went really quick. My last word, to share with the listeners and with you, Annemarie, is that mental health is a far greater domestic policy or a domestic issue than its ranking is really off. It is throughout our country, probably, in my opinion, really close to the top, with so many issues attached to it.
Yep.
And mental health is becoming, real close to the number one concern we should have as a country, especially for veterans, my brothers and sisters.
I agree.
In the armed services. So last word, and then we're going to wrap it up for tonight. It's been packed with a lot of great information, and we will have everything in the show notes. If you missed anything, you can get plugged in, you can participate, get activated, and get loud, and let's move forward with this program, and as a cohesive unit, commingling. The term, what did you say about hearts?
Blended hearts.
Blended hearts.
Blended hearts.
We can work towards blended hearts for everyone. So any last words?
Don't be afraid. You're not alone. There is an incredible amount of love and support here. Break that silence. Break the silence. There are people waiting to hear you and listen without judgment.
Beautiful.
And blend those hearts.
And blend those hearts. Thank you so much, Annemarie.
Thank you for asking me.
You bet, for being on the podcast. That's going to wrap it up, folks, for this episode 45. I'll be back in a couple of weeks with Gretchen Smith. She is the founder of Code of Vets, and it's a great organization, Code of Vets. It's a direct fundraising nonprofit organizations to help individual veterans out directly with little or no financial means. So it's a great group of people, and Gretchen Smith is the founder, and she'll be on with me in a couple of weeks. So I'm going to end the podcast like I always do. Until next time, take care of yourself, love your little person, and until next time, bye for now.
First to fight for the right and to build the nation's might, and the army goes rolling along. Proud of all we have done, fighting till the battle's won, and the army goes rolling along. And it's high, high, hey, fight our country's battles in the air, on land and sea. First to fight for right and freedom, and to keep our honor clean. We are proud to claim the